Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Redesign Your Life today. I'm Daniel Kobryner, your host. I'm a mental fitness coach, and this podcast it's about showing that in life change is possible at any moment. And in this podcast, what really is important is transformation to show that transformation is possible and my guests are individuals who had big transformations in their lives and who really like to share their stories. And today we have a very special guest. I'm very honored to receive Reverend Dr. Frank Selden uh, with us. Thank you so much for being with us. So,
Glad to be here. Thank you.
thank you. So, Frank is has a very interesting story. He was a successful tax attorney, and in 2014 he developed a very strong disease which really changed his life, to really brought him to dark moments, and he'll speak about this. And after that, his life transformed completely. And what I'll do is I'll ask Frank to really go deep into this. This is a very short intro, but I'd like you to run our listeners through your story, Frank.
Thank you, Daniel. Sure. So I loved my life 2014, beginning of the month. If someone had asked me to explain my life, I would have used quite glowing terms of the happiness and the success and the practice that I had built, the family that I had at the time. And then by the end of the month, I couldn't get out of bed. I'd been very active, including 20 years in the military, Army National Guard, and a few tours in Iraq. And I was used to being active as part of my identity. Another part of my identity or ego was I was the breadwinner, I was the provider, I was the one who took care of other people. I did not like being dependent. And when I say dependent, essentially in bed 23 hours a day, groggy, brain fog, had to shut down my business. I could usually get up maybe for half an hour, walk into the kitchen, make some bone broth for myself, be so exhausted after half an hour, I'd go back to bed and rest for another 11 hours. I did, through the help of my wife at the time and other friends, manage a lot of doctor appointments, a lot of blood tests. After about a year, they were uncovering actually rather rare, a virus that was eating my B cells, which are about 80% of the gut, about 20% of the brain. But they essentially, all of the doctors that I saw said, there's nothing we can do for you. This is something that you get to live with, and we're sorry. I did not want to live with this. I wanted to go back to the life that I had, and it seemed like I couldn't. So I chose to end my life with essentially not telling anybody, but I created a plan that involved being in a cemetery very late at night, pretty close to midnight, with a weapon. And as I was taking the safety off and putting my finger on the trigger and pointing the weapon essentially this way to myself, there were, for lack of a better word, ghosts, 20 or so, that showed up and were in a semicircle in front of me, maybe 10, 20 feet away, and essentially asked me if I was sure that I wanted to end my life this way.
Mm-hmm.
The implication of the conversation was that what I was about to do was going to have consequences after my death. That was not a concept that I believed in. I also didn't believe in ghosts hanging around cemeteries waiting for people to show up and carry on conversations with them. This was rather puzzling or confusing to me, what was happening that night. I was fairly certain that my mind was not creating this itself. I think that there were outside forces acting on this, but I couldn't explain them and didn't really believe in them. But I was willing to take a look at this idea that how I ended my life and as it grew, how I lived my life would have consequences on what happened after I passed away. That led to increase in my health, basically rebuilding my financial success, rebuilding relationships and friendships. And it all took a while. This was not an instantaneous transformation. But as Daniel was saying earlier, transformation is possible. My life is very different from what it is before in some regard. I also went back to school and got a ministerial degree and then a doctor of divinity degree. Now, essentially, just visit with people about what is consciousness, what is awareness, how can we build, or can we even have an impact on that part of us that survives after we pass away? I've looked at it from a variety of religious, primarily Christianity, some Judaism, some Buddhism,
Mhm.
various denominations within Christianity, taking a look at these questions and concepts and trying to uncover what's really going on with this part of ourself. Can we have an impact and what difference does it make? So that's where I'm at today. I have a ton of fun with my life and I love chatting about it. And I'm really grateful to be here today, Daniel. Thank you.
Well, thank you for sharing this story. It's a fascinating story. It's so I mean, a bigger transformation you can't have. I mean, it's really from this moment where you are about to take your life, and then to this change, to this encounter you had with those ghosts. You said,
Yes.
and was it the very first time you had kind of an experience like this? I mean,
Oh,
before that,
totally. Yeah.
completely.
I I've in my entire life I've been fascinated with ghost stories.
Okay.
Some people
Uh-huh.
are, some people are not. I've visited haunted places. I've tried to contact, typically from a skeptical point of view, I would say. I actually was a member of the British Skeptic Society for a while and had a ton of fun with that. So they're looking at paranormal events from a very skeptical point of view, and generally they are able to find explanations for paranormal events other
Mhm.
than believing in anything on the other side. So that's my general viewpoint. At the same time, I've seen a lot of things in my life that I cannot explain. And
Mhm.
that night in the cemetery is one of them. So, coming from a materialistic point of view, I believe that, and when I say materialistic, by the way, so two general branches of science into the realm of consciousness are currently labeled the materialist viewpoint, which says that everything about consciousness can be explained by our biology. So they look at molecular cells, they release studies. For example, there was one just a couple of weeks ago that was basically, hey, we found this molecule and we think that this is linked to consciousness. So the materialist science viewpoint essentially says all of this can be explained by biology, nothing
Mhm.
else involved. Then there is another branch of science called the noetic sciences, and they are asserting or creating a narrative that says when we're looking at things like near-death experiences, we're looking at remote viewing and various other kinds of activities that the materialist point of view does not fully, cannot explain these. There is another aspect to consciousness or awareness that is beyond just the purely biological. So that is where I'm essentially coming from these days. I am now a member of the Institute of Noetic Science as well, just as a member, not as a scientific researcher. but I do get access to their papers as well and love to review and read and discuss those. So there's competing ideas in science. I'm definitely on the noetic side of saying that our biology does not explain everything. But to get back to your question, have I had personal experiences like that night before then? Not in terms of seeing anything. No, that had not happened to me before, but I had some experiences for which I had no explanation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much for sharing. But what I picked up from what you said, Frank, is that even before that, you were already interested in ghosts and in this paranormal phenomenon. It's not.
Yes,
Some
my entire
people.
life, I remember being quite fascinated by them. And
So you see, sometimes there's something is called about the reticular system. That when we focused on something, actually we are going to look for evidence of where this is based. I don't know if it's makes sense or not, but at least you were interested in this.
you're absolutely correct. In some of my psychology classes, we've studied the reticular formation
Hmm.
and how it brings to our consciousness aspects of what is around us that we are particularly interested in. Yeah, you're spot on. So earlier I was saying that my belief is that inside myself, I don't think I created this, and I still don't.
Hmm.
However, the ability to tune in, like you're saying, is can certainly be part of the explanation. Now, I have friends that are very much into alien sightings. I have been with them when they say they see non-human beings. I've never seen any.
Hmm.
I'm open to it.
Hmm.
I'm not saying they don't, but when I'm looking where they're looking, I don't see what they're seeing. So there is an aspect of that as well. And I don't think the reticular formation can 100% explain that. There's something else going on. So my friends will say my vibration level, I'm not at the right vibration level to interact with these. And of course, they are, and they can help me get there if I go through these different meditations, etc. I've actually tried those things, and I still haven't seen anything. So I don't really know. I'm still skeptical, and I'm still open to those kinds of explanations for our world existence as well. But for my primary focus, it is to people who are alive right now on the planet
Hmm.
and saying, I want to do something different with my life. I don't like the direction it's taking. How do I change? How do I transform? What are the techniques involved? And in such a way that it's really going to have the biggest impact for the long term, including, I believe, that aspect of us that lives on after our bodies pass away. I think there's ways that we can build that, strengthen it, take care of it in a way that will set us up for success after death. And all of this kind of belief has come after that cemetery experience, not something at all that I really focused on. And I think if I had really focused on it, I wouldn't have been in the cemetery in the first place.
No, of course. So, and do you believe in the expression which says everything happens for a reason? There are no coincidences in life. What?
I have my own. I do believe in that expression, but I think that I believe in it differently than
Okay.
a lot of other people,
Hmm.
because I might add a tagline onto that phrase that sometimes the reason things happen is because we made stupid decisions.
Okay.
I do not believe that there is a force in the universe that is so micromanaging everything that we do that accounts for as an explanation for what happens. And that's a really deep rabbit hole we can spend a lot of time going down. which I have in the past. Don't know that we need to do that today. But I do believe, for example, well, I don't know that we really need to get into examples for your question was, do I believe on the concept? I believe that whatever happens, we can take whatever happens and turn it into our own benefit. Or we can resist, go in a different direction and have it impact us negatively, create a detriment. So our response to what happens, I think, is the key more than what happens itself.
Mhm.
And I think that there are things that happen which are not necessarily occurring in order for us to create a particular response, but we have the opportunity to respond in a variety of ways to everything that happens. When we come with that mindset, we can take everything around us and turn it into um, something that benefits us and moves it in the direction that we want to go. So that much I do believe in.
Okay, thank you for your reply. You see, I mean, personally, I just share a little bit. I come from a completely non-religious background, and before
Yeah.
it would have been out. But now, I mean, I kind of grew something different, perhaps at a spiritual level, where now I do believe that things happen for a reason. But obviously, and refer to the last point, we have free will. It means
Yes.
sometimes it's like signs are coming. We see signs, or let's put it this way, we become aware of signs from the universe, from God, the creator, and and that afterwards we can decide what we do with this. You see, so it's free will. It's
Yes. I agree with you.
and it's
Yeah,
so
100%.
and so this is really fascinating, Frank. So now I would like you to expand a little more on the idea of consciousness and, how do we elevate our consciousness? And just before this interview, we talked briefly about a few things, and I think you mentioned Joe Dispenza there.
Yes.
And I'd like you to go a little further in this because I'm passionate as well about what he's teaching.
Yeah, so he's really on the cutting edge of using meditation to affect change. A lot of his current talks, if you go watch some of his YouTubes or go to his website, are even include the concept that we have other potential realities that we can tap into and affect this reality. So
Mhm.
one of his most recent meditations is called Changing Boxes. And essentially the Changing Boxes one is if I were to have a mirror here and I'm looking in the mirror that way, and I also have a mirror here,
Mhm.
and if I'm looking into these two mirrors that are directly opposite of each other, it looks like there's multiple boxes of myself going in each direction as far as the eye can see. Does that make sense? So one
Absolutely.
of the quantum theories, quantum consciousness theories is, and I'm not sure I still like everything else, I'm skeptical and open. But one of the theories is that I might be able to go sideways into one of these other potential realities and go
Mhm.
grab something that I want in this reality because it supposedly there's unlimited numbers of these. And in one of these potential realities exists what it is that I'm seeking. And I go there and I grab it and I bring it back to me. So that's a concept that some people are not saying that's definitely true, but they're experimenting with it and having fun with it. So that's one of the new teachings that people are playing with, and I do think it's a lot of fun. But essentially, the basic concept is this. There, again, when we go back to the materialistic versus the noetic science, there's a very similar concept within science, which is that genetics explains everything, which was a theory for a long time. And then back in the 70s, there were some scientists, one of them was Dr. Bruce Lipton, who basically, as a biologist, was saying, well, wait a minute, no, here's some change that we see going on in this petri dish or this very controlled environment. The genetic expression does not explain what we see, that there are elements of the environment that are influencing how the genes are expressing.
Mhm.
When you get that concept, you're basically then that is a fundamental principle of a lot of what these kinds of metaphysical teachers are talking about. So there is a way for the genetic expression to happen through the manipulation of the environment. That concept is one of the concepts that I use to radically transform my health because I started to understand that what was going on with me with this virus eating
Mhm.
up all of my B cells was not destined to last that way. I could affect it not by killing the virus, because we didn't know a way, still don't know a way to do that, but I could change the environment and the expression of it through a variety of factors. So that was a key concept that I really built on this. Now, how that manifests when you look at that several layers later is that we now know that our attitude, the thoughts that we think, are part of the environment that our biology is in. And through thought and meditation, we can actually change our biological expression. The inner science, University of San Diego is doing some experiments on that. They've actually done for the past several years quite a few experiments and have some papers published on this where they're able to show through brain mapping what people have been thinking in different meditative states, what their brains look like, and create a picture of that and show changes in the biological expression as a result of that. So that is that I believe that that's a very powerful teaching that once we grasp onto that, we can greatly impact the changes we want to make in our lives.
Yeah, so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing. I have to say, all what you say resonates very much with me. I mean, but just, the first is, I mean, I believe that we live in a multiverse with the multiple numbers of realities, and whatever we imagine, it's already
Mhm.
one of our realities. And as you said, it's about how we put ourselves at the right frequency, the right vibrational level. But it's there,
Yes.
and we attract. We know that we all this world it's about energy, frequency and vibrations, as Nikola Tesla said. He said, this is the secret of the universe. So whenever we elevate our consciousness, and I very much associate it with vibrations, this is when we are going to attract other people, opportunities, jobs, etc., and elements from the universe which resonates at the same frequency.
Yeah, you're saying exactly what my friends who say that they see alien beings say, in the sense that you need to be at a particular vibrational frequency in order to have those interactions because they're outside of the frequency of the normal human experience. So we know that our ears, for example, only hear a very narrow range of the entire range of sound.
Mhm.
Our eyes only see a very narrow range of the entire spectrum of light. So we are limited physiologically with the way that we are created or put together. There is a huge realm of experience out there that we won't even be conscious of if we only stay within our physical selves and our five senses and experience the world that way. We are really limiting ourselves in our overall experience. There's a lot more to see and do in this world. So at the same time, I was saying earlier, even though I've been working on these other realms, my personal experience to this date outside of the senses is still rather limited.
Mhm. Yeah.
There are, again, things I know I can't explain using just the sensory experience, but it's something I'm having fun with. But you use the word vibration. So one of the concepts that I'm playing with now, when we take a look at the question of what happens to us after we die, one of the concepts that people are playing with that I'm having fun with is you can take, let's say we use the term soul. We have a soul. Well, what is that? You talked about a vibration. I believe, and I'm not the only one, there are people who are conceptualizing that our soul is a vibration. It's a
Mhm.
unique vibration. Everything about our life, including our body, everything is encoded in this very singular vibration. And we could say that that vibration is me, was me alive in a body. Now, that vibration no longer has connection to a body. It's more expanded than that. How does that vibration sense other vibrations? How do they interact? How do they see? How do they touch? How do they feel? Do they still get impressions? So when I'm in that kind of awareness and trying to be aware of the universe from that vibration level, it
Mhm.
is so much bigger than just the five senses. It is, I have never done drugs, but it's trippy. Say that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
And actually, it's very interesting because it's see, obviously, the five senses are physical senses, right? So
yes,
see, hear, smell, touch, and and taste. And already when we talk about the sixth sense, it's very interesting. Some people call it the third eye. But
yes.
really, this is exactly, but what is it? It's really this kind of the intuition, which is in the deepest part of our body, and some people even call it God or divine intelligence. So, and this actually, of course, brings all these physical senses, but the senses look outside. The third eye
Yes,
looks inside.
yes.
And everything, it's when you see, I really believe that when we follow our intuition, intuition doesn't lie to us. Intuition is
Oh, I
something,
100% agree with you. Absolutely. Yeah.
and this is so powerful. And Frank, the other thing which came to mind when it's, and we talked a little bit about Joe Dispenza, but in quantum physics, a given is that we influence directly our environment because our thoughts, our feelings, our words, everything have vibrations. Obviously, words have more vibrations than the thoughts. And actually, when we there's this amazing experience which was carried out by this professor Emoto in Japan, where he took a jug of water, he split it
Yes.
in two parts, and he gave it to students. And first, the students with one, they had they were they say they had to say words of hatred. Oh, you are. They were speaking to the water, thinking you are not nice. You are really. You are disgusting. You are not nice. All right. And then they did the same with the water from the same jug, but words of love. It's so beautiful. It's wonderful. It's oh so nice. And then they froze the water and under the microscope they look at the structure and where it was words of hatred and negativity were expressed, it was a very fragmented. It was the structure was very incoherent. And on the other side, there were where it was love and given, it was a very beautiful structure. And
Yeah. If some of your listeners are not familiar with those experiments, I recommend you look them up. I've read through a couple of those, including one where they froze the water and you can see the different patterns in the water.
Mhm.
So it's do we have time for a story?
Of course we
Okay.
do.
So here's another thing I didn't believe in or didn't understand. And that is the where the brain stores emotions and how these emotions can affect our overall energy pattern.
Mhm.
Again, prior to my cemetery experience, really living out of ego and ambition, creating a life that way. Yeah, I was successful, but was not paying attention to these other kinds of issues. So I had an injury on one of my tours in Iraq, was
Mhm.
involved in a IED blast that injured my lower back. After I'm learning how to put my life together differently, one of the concepts I came across is called cranial sacral therapy. And in cranial sacral therapy, the therapists learn to feel the spinal fluid and the energy that comes out of that that goes through the nerve network in our entire body. And they do that with a very light touch. I had never heard of this concept before. So I'm in this craniosacral therapy event for veterans with traumatic issues, PTSD. And I had an experience where they have the lead therapist with his hands right at the top of the brainstem here, very light touch. And then a couple of other therapists basically measuring the energy in my body. As they're doing this, my body started to turn, essentially curl up into a sitting position
Mhm.
sideways. I thought at the time they were doing this to me. They told me afterward their touch is way too light. They do not move the body, they're following the energy. My body did this. When I got into the position that I was in during the IED crash,
Mhm.
and they're following the energy. One of the hands of one of the attendants was on the major injury spot at the time. And I instantly relived in great detail that entire incident.
Mhm. Wow.
That place in my, just to the right on my lower spine, is where my body had stored everything, including the emotion, etc., about that incident got stored there. It's not stored in my brain. It was not just a 1010 kind of data memory. That is not how our bodies store memory. It has a lot to do with the emotion. Now, here's the part about the energy with what you were just talking about. Parts of my body that are energetically downstream from my brainstem past that injury. Does that make sense? So you
Mhm.
go through the brainstem, the core of our nerve energy. When you're going past the spot where I had all of this stored, there is a decrease in the energy downstream from it. And I am having physiological symptoms there because it's not getting the nerve energy it really needs to be fully sustained. That was instantaneously fixed in that event, instantaneously. All of that got released and everything downstream for that started to function better. And some symptoms that I were having were disappearing. So we know physiologically just a base physical position that we have memories stored all over our body. They are stored with emotional energy for traumatic events, and it impacts our overall energy field. Those can be cleared, and we can create a very whole, fully functional energy pattern within our bodies. The If we were to try to measure it, it looks a lot like a torus energy field.
Mhm.
And what we want is for all of that energy to be fully circulating. And mine was not. So it's doing a lot better now. Do we have any kind of machine that can totally picture that energy field around us? I don't think that's been developed yet, but there are people who can tune into that and can help us with this as keep reappearing in my life. So it's a lot of fun to play with. And you're really onto something there when you're talking about that energy experience that we can take a look at that, make it part of our awareness, focus on it, and create a lot of healing for ourselves by healing that aspect of us.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for this beautiful story, Frank, and this example. And I very much relate to that on several levels. First of all, I got very interested in Hinduism and the study of the chakras. And
Yes,
there are the 7 chakras, and it's all about energy. I mean, it's the idea is that for Indian medicine, we there are blockages. There are blockages, and the energy should be able normally to flow between the root chakra up to the crown chakra, and it goes for the
yes,
various ones. And if there's a blockage, it cannot go. So this is where they work actually on these particular areas exactly to unblock these chakras. And it can be through some breathing exercises, through meditation. There are different techniques. So this is one area. But one thing which I experienced myself is that it's Reiki. I don't know if you are familiar with
yes,
Reiki, but I had somebody practicing Reiki on my body and really scanning my body. And this is amazing for some people who haven't tried it. It's like you've got to have obviously a good Reiki healer, but you put their hands and they can scan the body. And what happens is it's all about energy. So what happens is imagine that each organ has a certain amount of energy. It's like, like a battery. And if it's flat, then your hands are going to discharge energy because and obviously, first of all, this energy is received from the so-called Schumann resonance, the resonance
yes.
of the earth. But it's fascinating. So you can really see where something is lacking. And this is where you can work on.
Yeah, I prior to, my what I sometimes refer to as my previous life, I don't mean before being born here, I mean before my disease and suicide incident, that life that I created, I knew people in Reiki, totally dismissed it, wasn't even curious. Now, huge believer, huge fan. So Um, yeah, thanks for bringing that up. If some of the listeners have never looked into that, I encourage them to do that. Now, here's something. So, what you were just saying about the energy in Reiki, usually we're relying on another person who has that kind of training to help with our energy field. There are some teachers who teach some very simple techniques, in essence, doing Reiki on ourselves, although I don't
Mhm.
know that they would use that term.
We
So,
can,
for
yeah.
example,
Mhm.
somebody that I listen to, his name is Greg Braden. He used to be a meteorologist, geologist, and he teaches a simple technique of just putting one hand in our heart space, talking about the chakras. It would be the heart chakra, and the other one, he says here in our mind, not necessarily the crown, but he teaches a very simple breathing heart mind resonance technique.
Mhm.
And where we're using our own hands and we're using our own breathing and our intention to synchronize the energy between these two spaces. So even though he doesn't use the term Reiki when he talks about that, in essence, it's very similar. Just, and it's a technique that we can do with ourselves, not necessarily needing to go find a Reiki practitioner. Although, like you were saying, I'm a fan. I do recommend it as well.
Yeah, you see, again, I got to. to be interested in a completely new world for me. Another one is tapping, where sometimes
Yes,
you tap, for instance, and then you tap your forehead and this. It's again, everything it's about, when you think about this, it's about awakening, awakening the energy which is without us. And these are techniques which people have used for millenniums. It's not new. It's just
very
people have
true.
this wisdom. And
Yep,
of course, what happened is, with Western society, we tended to discard. We talked about alternative medicine, but actually, from which right do we do that? Because a lot of these medicines are they are much older, and they were practiced in China, in India, in Amazonia, everywhere. But we thought, oh, we have the science. But actually, now it's a good time, instead of trying to look at, you say, way to solve problems, is how do you anticipate them? How do you look at the cause? And this is where the real work starts.
yeah, absolutely. So you're discussing about medicines, for example, here in the United States, and this is something I've also actually followed for decades. I've always been interested in nutrition. In the U.S., quite several decades ago, the I wouldn't say pharmaceutical, that wasn't the industry at the time, but there was definitely companies who were creating vitamins, for example, vitamin C, using chemicals, formulas. And there were companies that would put out vitamin C pills from natural sources like rose hips or oranges, etc. There was some legislation that was essentially passed that made it very difficult for the companies who were using natural products as their sources for vitamin C to essentially continue existing and selling their products. The government made it very difficult for them through the prompting and funding of these companies who were patenting the chemical formulations for different vitamins and owning those patents and making money off of those patents. You cannot patent natural vitamin C, but you can patent a chemical formula. So here in the United States, our nutrition industry shifted considerably to these kinds of chemical formulations. Well, we now sign there's a lot of, I don't know if really science is quite the right word, but there is certainly a shifting of the pendulum back in the direction of natural food, knowing that these natural sources, for example, rather than taking a vitamin C pill, if we're eating foods that contain vitamin C, there are other compounds in there that are not in the chemical formulations that enhance the use of that vitamin C and turn it and are better for our body overall. So when I was learning to rebuild my health,
Mhm.
I needed to look into a lot of what you were saying right there. I needed to look into food as medicine and not pharmaceuticals. For
Mhm.
one reason, there weren't any that were shown to have any effect whatsoever. But that doesn't mean that no is the end of the discussion. So when I'm going to the doctors, then they say, we have nothing for you. Or they might say, there is nothing for you.
Mhm.
That phrase was incorrect. What they meant was under our medical model and within the box that we're allowed to work in, there's nothing that we can recommend. But there's a lot of things outside that box, just like there's a lot of aspects of the world that are outside the box of our five senses. So there were other remedies that I was investigating and could incorporate into my life. And I fully believe that that's one of the reasons I have one of the very few success stories of overcoming that particular health issue, is I was willing to investigate those kinds of things.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for mentioning all that, Frank. You see, for everybody listening, you see the looking out when we speak about looking up after our health, it's at all levels. It's physical, mental, spiritual, emotional, but already food, I said, the food we eat. I mean, of course, I mean, processed food has no energy. See, everything is about energy, as Einstein said, so when yes, when we get vegetable, when we get fruit, when we start cooking, yes, it is a little more work than buying something processed, but in terms of nutrition value, it's so much more important, and having a variations. Even people say the colors, just having different colors of the vegetable and fruit makes a difference. And there's so much research on this. It really should be like a long life habit. Of course, sometimes you can indulge yourself if you want in something else, but if we really want to be healthy, it's about this. It's about practicing some exercises, could be walking, things again. And it's for instance, mental exercises, meditation, practicing gratitude, being mindful. All this is so important. And when we start embracing these habits in our lives, really changes are very noticeable.
Yeah, I am I to me, the gratitude that you just mentioned is one of the biggest keys to my turnaround and successfully rebuilding my life. I needed to learn lessons in gratitude. So you dialing back to earlier part of our conversation, you had mentioned the concept of all things happening for a reason.
Mhm,
And sometimes whatever the reason is, we might not see it.
mhm,
We're so focused on something else. Oh, in my previous life, I carried a lot of anger or frustration. I would get upset when things didn't go my way. I liked to be able to control things, predict, control the outcome. And if the outcomes I wanted didn't happen, then the energy that I'm carrying would be unhealthy.
mhm,
Anger would be one of several different emotions that would come into play. And I essentially, someone might label that as the type A personality that the unhealthy side of a type A personality. I might still be type A, but I don't have that part of my personality anymore. And what I replaced it with was gratitude. Gratitude for what shows up and how it shows up, whether it was exactly what I wanted or not. That gratitude practice you just mentioned, it to me is indispensable. It's one of the something that I continue to practice on a daily basis. It is a huge life change. So thank you for bringing that up. Yeah,
No,
I'm a
you're
huge
very
fan.
welcome. And you see, I mean, I do it as well. And just, in the morning, you open your eyes and you are alive, right?
Hmm.
Exactly, you are alive, and you look outside and you can see trees, and then you can see things, and it's like it. When we say gratitude, it can be for the very little things, the nice smell of my cup of coffee, or the nice conversation, or smiling to someone. Because the great thing is when we are in this gratitude mode, it's incompatible with anger.
Yes.
So the more we are, and you see, something else as well which comes to mind is the remember never to take things personally. And when this is it's a big teaching for me. When I heard it from the Four Agreements, this book, which really was really
John
inspiring me a
Reese,
lot.
yes. I like
Exactly,
that
yeah.
book. Yeah.
It's like it's just that when you know that whatever people say to you or do to you, it's got nothing to do with you. It's them reflecting their own insecurities, their childhood trauma, their fears, their doubts, even parents. when you realize that, facts don't change. Life is there, but what's the most important is what do we make of that? What do we have
Yes.
control on? When we realize that, all of a sudden, people will still say the same things, but we look at them very differently.
Yeah, one of the it's a different way of saying the exact same thing of what you just said is to me the difference, the concepts of operating from ego or operating from awareness.
Absolutely.
When I am operating from ego, as I did pretty much all the time, when that ego gets challenged, it creates conflict. It wants to push back. When I'm operating from awareness, the exact same challenge can happen. The same word, same person, same environment, everything. But when ego is set aside and I'm operating from awareness, I can do exactly what you just said. I know that that energy and those words, etc., have a lot more to do with them than they do about me. I don't need to take it personally. My ego doesn't need to get all ruffled up and get ready to go back after them. It's not an ego issue. So I was not good at that. When I was starting to rebuild my life, I needed to practice every day, and I still do, operating from awareness instead of ego. And it might take, say, 5 minutes in the morning. I'm just going to meditate on being aware and suppressing or setting ego aside. Because ego isn't present tense. Ego is always in story. It's either in the past or the future, but it's always in story and creating narratives and projections. When we are present and we are in awareness, we're not operating from ego. When I can be present with someone and actually listen and not engaging their story through ego or creating these narratives, I'm also truly listening. One of the aspects I realized about myself previously, I didn't listen to people well. Just didn't. Always in my head, always in ego. It's the opposite of listening.
Mhm.
Burned a lot of friendships. Hard for people to get close to me.
Mhm.
Even though physically right there, I wasn't really there. Thinking about the next event, the next thing I'm doing, my huge checklist. I still have 3 things to get done today that aren't done. When I'm living from awareness, I'm being present, including with the people that I'm with, or like this podcast and being with Daniel. And don't see any listeners. I assume they're out there. You've got a good following. But that sense of awareness is, I would rather be here in awareness and be present and everything that that means about my life. I'm grateful for the success I was able to rebuild, but I would rather be in this awareness and be less successful than be back in ego and be more successful. It's that important to me now.
Well, thank you so much for these words. I'm fully on par. I fully resonate with this. And you see, I was in sales all my life and management. And sometimes I was talking more than listening. And I have to say, I worked on myself as well, and it's a muscle. And actually, it's very interesting as well, because see, the ego and all these programs running on autopilot, they are physically located on the left side of our brain. The right side of our brain, this is where you've got the consciousness, this is where you've got the clarity. But these are muscles which we have to train. We have to
Yes.
train them because, and the more we do, the more we come into this sage mode, which really gives us the clarity. And this is where we live and lead from a place of abundance and not from a place of lack, not from a place
Yes.
of fear.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the go back to a question you asked me about explaining my understanding of consciousness these days.
Mhm.
I think on the video, people can see this diagram.
Yeah, I
Okay,
mean, we can
there's
see it, but we don't see what's inside because it's too far. But
too far. Yeah. So if you go to my website that we're just building, soulbuilding.life, I explain this one,
okay,
which is one that we created around this concept. And so basically, if you can see the circles,
yeah,
there is a version of, if you ask what's the makeup of a human being? So several of the religions would talk about this, and even places that are spiritual, not religious, will essentially say that there is a consciousness in the universe that is everywhere,
yeah, absolutely.
including within. This
Universal
consciousness
consciousness.
exists whether we exist or not. That's the top circle. You can
Mhm.
call it universal consciousness, source, singularity. Some people might call it God. I have some opinions on that. We don't need to go there today. But essentially, this universal source has a vibration that is uniquely us, sort of entangled the connection between the first and the second. So the middle circle is us metaphysically, not physically, metaphysically,
Mhm.
beyond the physical, that aspects of us that are outside of our physical realm and touch. The bottom circle is the physical realm.
Mhm.
And each of these realms have an intersection, a union, where they're interacting with each other. The reality is, you might just take all three circles and just put them all on top of each other. They're they're that connected. But for the purpose of the concepts that I'm trying to work on, I've separated them out more and focus on the union between the two. And that is where I say soul building takes place. We can build our souls, strengthen them metaphysically on the interaction between the first two circles, and then physically on the interaction between the second two. And I really actually believe that there is physical activities that we can do that enhance our metaphysical state. I do think that quantum consciousness talks about this as well. And a lot of the new science, the noetic sciences that are coming out, can point to this, that how we interact with life on a physical level has metaphysical consequences. So that's the second section between the bottom two circles. So that's a graphic description of the ideas that I'm playing with these days. I've started a Substack about that, and you can track all of that through the website soulbuilding.life, which is a new subset, not .com, .org. It's a new suffix for websites, and I'm really excited that we got one of the early domains for that. So soulbuilding.life, and you can see a description of that on that website.
Beautiful, it's beautiful. And see, when I look at these three circles, what comes to mind is three words: soul, mind, body.
Yes, yeah, very
It's
similar nomenclature.
uh,
Yeah.
and it's you see, when we talk about going to this other dimension, and perhaps I'm going back to Dr. Joe Dispenza as well, he speaks a lot of the activation of the pineal gland, which is really,
Yes.
which is crystallized. And normally for a lot of people, because a fluoride of heavy metals, I mean, it cannot fully operate. I mean, for everybody listening here, this is the organ which produces the melatonin, which is the substance what helps us regulating our sleep. But we say on a spiritual level, when it's open, it's like a transmitter, which really brings us access to this universal consciousness and to another dimension.
I've been involved in some group meditation specifically focused on activating the pineal gland.
Uh-huh.
That's a wild,
Is that-
those are, I don't even want to attempt to try to describe them, but that is out there.
is it?
So
It's a
yeah,
fascinating.
It's fascinating, and there are certainly teachers that talk about pineal gland activation and its connection with this outer realm of consciousness. So there are some people that believe that that is physically the connection spot.
Exactly.
And decades ago, I remember teachers talking about the hypothalamus potentially being the primary connection space. And in some of the meditations, especially the older ones from some Buddhism, Hinduism, Northern India, they talk about physically right here and right behind this bone, which is not where the pineal gland is. So
Good idea.
all of the research that I've done, we've looked at three different physical locations, but they're all pretty much right up in
Absolutely.
here.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I've, uh, I've done similar research, I mean, at the lower level, perhaps, but yeah, and it's fascinating that you find it from uh, different places. I think there's this expression as well of Kundalini
Yes.
yoga. Again, it all comes. Imagine it comes. This is comes from Hinduism, but when you see this is why we talk about universal consciousness, because actually things come from different parts of the world, but some people had that knowledge again because they were tapping into this universal consciousness. And Frank, I really want to thank you. It was absolutely beautiful conversation, and thank you so much for sharing all your knowledge. And we it could go on, and perhaps we'll have another one, because it's really fascinating at another time.
Yeah.
And Frank, if there were like three tips you could leave our listeners with today, what would it be?
Since my cemetery experience, my life has really been focused on what happens to us after we die and whether we can have an impact on that.
Mhm.
So the three tips that I leave with people as I'm speaking or interacting with people all evolve around that concept. Tip number one is that I do believe that there is a consciousness in the universe, and I believe that we can tap into it
Mhm.
through meditation, through awareness, through being present. We can connect with this, like that diagram suggests between the top and the second circle. So the tip really is to spend time with that every day, even if it's 5 to 7 minutes to get started. Spend some time in that connection every day. The other tip is more of a question. If there is part of us that survives us when we pass away, what happens to it? Is it static, i.e., stuck there for all of eternity or some period of time? Or does it go through some changes, which is what I now believe? And if it is going to go through some changes, is the starting point, i.e., the moment of our death, its starting point for its next adventure? Can we influence that to make it a better journey or more successful, to use that word? And I believe that there are things that we can do that are going to create a better experience for us in whatever happens next. So that my tip is to remain curious about that,
Mhm.
to be aware of it, put it on your radar screen, think about it. What is that all about? What does, if anything, survive me when I die? And is there anything that I can do today that is going to have a positive impact on that? Because all of this, the homes we have, vehicles, whatever wealth and bank accounts, all those kinds of things, we're not taking that with us. What
Mhm.
we're taking with us, if you believe anything at all exists after we go, is just that vibration that is uniquely us.
Well,
So the tip is to think about that and consider whether there's anything we can do to be successful in that part of our current existence.
thank you so much, Frank. It was, as I said,
Thank
wonderful.
you, Daniel.
And all your details will be as well and with the notes how to connect with you, with your website, and
Sure. It's all on the website, soulbuilding.life. Yes.
so building your life. So again,
Oh, and by the way, Daniel, there's also a 20-page PDF I believe that people will be able to download. My website person said it should be up now. If it's
okay,
not, it will be soon. I've condensed a lot of my journey into about 20 pages. What were the most important lessons, all of which we've talked about today, more in story form. It's free. There's nothing for sale on the website. It's just information. So, but I believe that that is available for download if people want to go into more detail about that journey. Can read that there. And
yeah,
one of the tips, by the way, is gratitude.
well,
So
thank you, and thank you so much.
please download that. There's no cost, and we don't even ask for an email address, as far as I know.
Well, no, this is great. And I encourage everybody to reach out to Frank and to go to his website, because if you want to know more about this, you see this is really the go-to place. So again, thank you. And thank you for our auditors, our listeners to be with us. I hope you took some good tips and, information from this conversation. And I encourage you to pass it on to your friends or family, anybody who is interested in this topic about energy, about life, about what's happened next. And because we are all here to learn and to grow. So thank you so much and see you in the next episode. Bye bye.